Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
Thanksgiving dinner should be warm, comforting, filled with the smells of roasted turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, and freshly baked rolls. But instead, it feels like I'm suffocating, like the walls of my parents' dining room are closing in on me, trapping me in a place I should have learned to escape from years ago. The long oak table is crowded with family members, their laughter echoing around the room, silverware clinking against porcelain plates as they scoop up stuffing and cranberry sauce, sipping wine like we're the perfect picture of a happy, loving family. But I know better. I know that under the polite conversation and forced smiles, there's an unspoken hierarchy, a quiet truth that I've been forced to swallow my entire life. And tonight, as I sit here, pushing green beans around my plate, pretending not to notice the way my mother's gaze passes over me like I'm invisible, I feel the weight of that truth pressing down on my chest. My older brother, Ethan, is the favorite. He always has been. He's the golden child, the one who can do no wrong, the one my parents have built their entire world around. It has always been Ethan first and Rachel second. Ethan gets the praise, Ethan gets the extra slice of pie, Ethan gets the benefit of the doubt when he screws up. I get tolerated. And tonight, I know, will be no different. Then, just as I take a sip of my wine, my mother stands up, raising her glass with that same soft, adoring smile she always saves for him. Before we dig into dessert, she says, her voice warm, affectionate, proud, I just want to take a moment to say how grateful I am for my family. She glances around the table, her gaze sweeping over me without pause, landing on Ethan like he's the only one that matters. And I think it's only right that we toast to my favorite son, my oldest, Ethan. The words hit me like a slap to the face. Everyone laughs, like it's some harmless little joke, like it's not the most blatant, humiliating confirmation of something I've known my whole life, but never wanted to hear out loud. My father chuckles as he clinks his glass against Ethan's, my aunts and uncles smile like they've heard this toast a million times before, like it's just a tradition, just a fact. Even Ethan smirks, shrugging like, yeah, of course. What else is new? I stare down at my plate, my fingers curling into a fist in my lap, nails digging into my palm so hard it stings. My face burns, my stomach twists, and I feel that familiar ache in my chest, the one that tells me I should have stayed home, that I should have known better than to come here expecting anything different. Then, under the table, I feel my husband's hand slip into mine. His fingers squeeze gently, grounding me, pulling me back from the rising tide of anger and hurt threatening to consume me. I turn my head slightly, and when I glance at him, his face is unreadable, but his thumb brushes against my skin in a way that tells me he sees me, that he knows exactly how much that moment just cost me. And then he leans in, his lips barely moving as he whispers, "Check your email." I blink, momentarily pulled out of my spiraling thoughts. My phone is next to my plate, half hidden under my napkin, and I hesitate for a second before reaching for it, my fingers feeling numb as I unlock the screen. The email is from an unknown sender. The subject line is blank. There's no message, no explanation, just a single attachment. A screenshot. And the second I open it, my entire body goes cold. The blood drains from my face. My chest tightens. Because staring back at me from the screen is something that changes everything. My feet feel unsteady as I step away from the table, my mind racing too fast for my body to keep up, my hands clenching the phone so tightly that my knuckles turn white. I mumble some excuse, something about needing to freshen up, but I doubt anyone is actually listening because all eyes are still on Ethan, the beloved son, the golden child. The one my mother just toasted like he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. No one notices when I push back my chair, no one questions why I leave, no one cares that my heart is hammering so hard it feels like it might burst right through my ribs. I make my way down the hallway, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor as I reach the bathroom, closing the door behind me with a soft but decisive click. My breath comes in short, ragged bursts, and I force myself to inhale deeply, filling my lungs, trying to push back the nausea rising in my throat. With trembling fingers, I unlock my phone again, even though I don't need to look at it, even though the words from the email are already seared into my brain like a brand. But I do it anyway, scrolling back to the screenshot, my vision blurring as I read it over and over, my stomach twisting with something that feels an awful lot like sickness, an awful lot like rage, an awful lot like betrayal. It's a conversation between Ethan and Lauren, my husband's sister, a woman I have welcomed into my home, a woman who has sat across from me at countless family gatherings, a woman who has smiled at me with that fake, knowing grin while carrying on a secret relationship with my own brother behind my back. I don't know how long it's been going on, I don't know when it started, I don't even know how deep it runs, but I know one thing with absolute certainty. I have been played for a fool. You know I wish it was you, not Rachel. One day, babe. One day. I grip the edge of the bathroom sink, my reflection staring back at me in the mirror, my expression blank except for the fire burning in my eyes. A fire that has been smothered for years, buried under years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated as if I was nothing more than an afterthought in my own family. But now that fire is raging, consuming every ounce of patience I have left. And then the memories hit me all at once, like a flood that has been waiting for the dam to break. I see myself at 8 years old, standing next to my father as he wheels out a brand new bicycle for Ethan, a shiny red one with his name practically etched into the frame, while I stand there clutching a second-hand bike, rusted at the edges, too big for my small hands to grip properly. I remember how my mother gushed over Ethan's gift, how she ruffled his hair and called him her little genius, while I stood there waiting, hoping, praying that someone would look at me with even a fraction of that same warmth. I see myself at 17, watching Ethan stumble into the house, his breath reeking of alcohol, his words slurred, his grin lazy and confident as he tosses me my own car keys, the ones he had stolen without asking, the ones he had used to drive straight into a telephone pole. I remember how my parents looked at me, not with anger at him but with disappointment toward me, as if I had failed by not anticipating his recklessness, as if I had done something wrong simply by existing in the same household as him. And now, years later, after everything, I sit here in this small bathroom, staring at cold, undeniable proof that nothing has changed, that Ethan still takes whatever he wants, does whatever he pleases, and somehow, still gets away with it. Except this time, he won't. I take a slow, steadying breath, forcing myself to focus, forcing myself to think. My fingers tighten around my phone as I scroll through the rest of the email, searching for more, searching for something, anything, that might tell me how deep this betrayal really runs. But there's nothing else, just the single screenshot, just enough to confirm what I already knew in my gut, just enough to make my blood boil, just enough to make me want to burn everything to the ground. A soft knock on the door startles me, and I flinch, my heart slamming against my ribs as I hear my husband's voice on the other side. Rachel? You okay? The words sit heavy on my tongue, but I can't bring myself to say them, can't bring myself to admit that I am not okay, that I am nowhere near okay, that I am currently standing in a bathroom on Thanksgiving night, holding a piece of evidence that could shatter my family in a matter of seconds. Instead, I exhale slowly, my fingers curling around the doorknob as I open it just enough to see his face. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes are sharp, knowing, steady, the way they always are when he knows something is wrong, but is waiting for me to tell him on my own terms. I step forward, pushing the phone into his hand, watching as his gaze drops to the screen, watching as his jaw tightens, as his lips press into a thin line, as his fingers curl around the edges like he wants to crush the device in his grip. He reads it once, twice, and then looks back at me, his voice low and controlled, but simmering with anger just beneath the surface. How long do you think this has been going on? I shake my head, my voice barely above a whisper, hoarse from the effort it takes to keep myself together. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. He doesn't argue, doesn't tell me to calm down, doesn't try to rationalize the situation the way so many people would. Instead, he nods once, sliding his phone out of his pocket as he taps something on the screen. "We're not letting this slide," he says, and it's not a question, Not a suggestion. It's a statement, a promise, a confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. No, we are not letting this slide. For the first time in my life, I have the upper hand. And I'm going to make sure that Ethan never sees it coming. I sit back down at the table, my heart still pounding in my chest, the weight of the revelation pressing against my ribs like a slowly tightening vice. But on the surface, I look composed, calm, entirely in control of my emotions, even though every nerve in my body is telling me to scream. I know better than to react immediately. I know better than to make a scene before I have every piece of the puzzle. I know better than to play my hand too early, so instead, I take a slow sip of wine and let the warmth burn its way down my throat as I force a smile onto my lips, nodding along as my father tells the same tired story he always tells about the time Ethan won his high school football championship. The room is filled with laughter, filled with the warm, familiar sounds of a family that believes it is unbreakable, filled with voices that have spent years drowning me out, treating me like background noise, treating me like a guest in my own life. But tonight, everything is different. Tonight, I am the one who knows something they don't. Tonight, I am the one holding the knife behind my back, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, waiting for the moment when Ethan's entire world comes crashing down around him. My phone buzzes softly against my thigh, and I know exactly who it is before I even glance at the screen. Lauren is panicking, just as I knew she would, because nothing shatters the illusion of a secret affair quite like the terrifying realization that someone else knows. I let my fingers hover over the screen for a moment, watching as her name lights up again and again, her desperation practically dripping through the digital connection, but I don't answer. She doesn't deserve my time. She doesn't deserve my words. She doesn't deserve anything other than the cold, inevitable truth that is about to come crashing down on her and my brother like a tidal wave they never saw coming. Instead, I do something better. I text her first, sending a message so simple and so effective that I can practically feel the panic it will cause on the other end of the line. You might want to watch your back tonight. I know everything. I hit send and then, without hesitation, I turn off my phone screen, set it down next to my plate, and pick up my fork like nothing has changed, like I haven't just set something in motion that cannot be undone. The next hour passes in a blur of meaningless small talk, forced pleasantries, and the kind of suffocating family traditions that I have spent my entire life enduring without protest. But this time, I am the one in control. I am the one waiting in the shadows. I am the one who knows that before the night is over, everything is going to be different. Ethan sits across from me, his usual cocky grin plastered on his face, his confidence still intact because he has no idea what is coming. No idea that his perfect little world is about to be shattered in front of the very people who have spent decades worshipping him. And then, finally, the moment arrives. The pumpkin pie is being passed around, the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg filling the air, the last act of the evening settling into place, and I know that if I wait any longer, if I let another moment slip through my fingers, I will lose the perfect opportunity that has been handed to me. So, as my mother takes a sip of her wine, as my father leans back in his chair, as my aunts and uncles reach for their forks, I stand up, clearing my throat just loud enough to make the room fall silent. Actually, I say, lifting my own glass in the air, my voice steady, my expression unreadable, I have a toast too. Ethan shifts in his seat. The way his eyes flick toward me, the way his fingers tighten ever so slightly around his fork, the way his entire body seems to tense for just a fraction of a second, it's enough. It's enough to tell me that he feels it too, that deep, unshakable instinct that warns you when something is about to go terribly, terribly wrong. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make the tension thick enough to cut with a knife, just long enough to make my mother glance between us with mild confusion, just long enough to let Ethan squirm before I finally speak again. I want to toast to honesty, I say, my voice smooth, my eyes locked onto his like a predator watching its prey. The room is still for a beat, maybe two, and then Ethan laughs, an awkward, uncertain chuckle that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Honesty, huh? He says, tilting his head slightly, trying to play it off like a joke, trying to keep the control that is already slipping through his fingers. That's a pretty serious topic for Thanksgiving. Yeah, I say, smiling just a little, tilting my head as I lift my phone from the table. But I think it's an important one, don't you? And then, before he has a chance to respond, before he has a chance to weasel his way out of what's coming, I press play. The sound fills the room immediately, cutting through the warm, comfortable atmosphere like a knife slicing through flesh. You know I wish it was you, not Rachel. One day, babe. One day. The words hang in the air like a noose, tightening around Ethan's neck, choking the life out of the image he has spent years carefully constructing. A fork clatters onto a plate. My mother's eyes widen. My father's jaw tightens. A sharp, stunned silence spreads through the table, stretching longer and longer until the weight of it becomes unbearable. Ethan doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He just stares at me, his face rapidly losing color, his mind no doubt scrambling for some kind of explanation, some kind of way out, some kind of lie that will make this all disappear. But there is no escape. There is no excuse. There is no lie that can undo what has already been said, no lie that can erase the words that have already burned themselves into the ears of every single person in this room. I don't move. I don't speak. I just watch as the reality of what I have just done sinks into him, see the exact moment he realizes that he is drowning and that this time, for the first time in his life, no one is going to save him. The words hang in the air like a thick, suffocating fog, filling every inch of the dining room with a weight so heavy that no one dares to move, no one dares to breathe, no one dares to be the first to speak. The recording continues to play, Ethan's voice dripping with flirtation, with secrecy, with the kind of confidence that only a man who has never faced consequences can possess, and for the first time in my entire life, I watch as my brother is stripped of the pedestal he has been placed on since the day he was born. My mother's fork slips from her fingers, clattering onto her plate with a sharp metallic sound that cuts through the stunned silence, her eyes wide, her face suddenly pale, her entire body frozen as if her brain is refusing to process what she has just heard. She blinks once, twice, then turns to Ethan with a look I have never seen on her face before, a look that is not disappointment, not confusion, but something much deeper, something much worse. "What the hell is this?" she asks, her voice low, shaky, disbelieving, like she is still waiting for Ethan to jump in with some explanation, some excuse, some magical lie that will make this all go away. Ethan's entire body stiffens, his face going pale, his usual cocky confidence nowhere to be found as his mouth opens and closes uselessly, his brain scrambling for something, anything, to say that might fix this, might turn the tables back in his favor. He stammers, but nothing else comes out, nothing that can change the fact that everyone in this room has already heard the truth, that the golden child has finally been caught. I don't say anything, don't rush to fill the silence, don't give him the mercy of an escape route, because I want him to feel this moment, want him to feel what it's like to have the walls closing in. To have every eye in the room staring at him with judgment instead of admiration, to have the weight of his own actions dragging him down with no one left to pull him out of the wreckage. My father, who has remained stone-faced up until this point, exhales heavily, the sound loud in the unbearable silence, and when he finally speaks, his voice is firm, steady, and laced with something that sounds an awful lot like disappointment. "Ethan," he says, the single name carrying more weight than an entire speech could, "is this true?" Ethan swallows hard, his hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles go white, his eyes darting between my mother, my father, and me, like he is searching for a lifeline, for someone to save him, for someone to believe in him the way they always have. But there is no escape, no saving, no blind faith left to rely on, because this time, I made sure to destroy every possible excuse before he even had the chance to open his mouth. His lips part like he's about to speak, about to spin some desperate story, but before he can even get a word out, I reach into my pocket, pull out my phone, and slam another piece of evidence onto the table, another nail in his coffin, another undeniable truth that will leave him with nowhere left to run. A photo. A photo of him stepping out of Lauren's apartment late at night, his jacket slung over his shoulder, his head down, his entire body language screaming guilt. It lands face up on the polished wood, directly in front of my mother, who stares at it for a long, agonizing moment, her face going from pale to something much worse, something almost green, like the very sight of it is making her physically ill. And maybe it is. Maybe it's not just the image itself, but the realization, the undeniable truth that for the first time in her life, she can't ignore, can't brush under the rug, can't explain away with a soft pat on the shoulder and a gentle reminder that Ethan is just a boy, that Ethan didn't mean it, that Ethan is still a good person deep down. Because for the first time, there is proof. For the first time, there is something she can't twist into a misunderstanding, something she can't blame on someone else, something so painfully clear that even she has no choice but to face it. My mother presses a hand to her mouth, looking as if she might be sick right there at the dinner table, her entire body trembling as she finally looks up at Ethan, and the silence that follows is louder than anything I have ever heard before. Ethan stares at the photo like it's a foreign object, his jaw clenched, his breathing heavy, his face still pale, but now tinged with something else, panic. I can see the gears turning in his head, can see the way his brain is working overtime to salvage whatever he can, to come up with a story, a reason, an explanation that will shift the blame, turn the tables, erase the damage that has already been done. But there's no way out this time. No escape route, no one willing to step in and defend him, because he has finally run out of second chances. The room remains deathly quiet, and I savor every second of it. Let the moment stretch as long as possible. Let the weight of his shame settle into his bones. Let him feel what it's like to be the one under scrutiny, the one who has to answer for his actions, the one who can't just flash a charming smile and make the problem disappear. And then, after what feels like an eternity, my mother finally speaks. "Tell me it's not true," she whispers, her voice barely audible, her eyes shining with something between anger and devastation, between disbelief and reluctant acceptance. Ethan's mouth opens, and for a moment, I think he's actually going to try, actually going to dig himself even deeper, actually going to look her in the eye and spew some desperate lie. But then his shoulders sag, his entire body deflating like the air has been punched out of his lungs, and for the first time in his life, he has nothing to say. The golden child has finally fallen. And there is no one left to catch him. The silence stretches so long that it feels like the very air in the room has thickened, pressing down on my chest, making it harder to breathe, making it impossible to move, making every second feel like an eternity in which I am waiting for the inevitable. Waiting for the reaction, waiting for the final moment where my family is forced to see Ethan for exactly what he is. My mother still hasn't looked away from the photo, her fingers shaking slightly as she clutches her wine glass, her knuckles white from how tightly she is gripping it, as if letting go will make everything crash down around her, as if holding on to it will somehow keep her world from completely shattering. Ethan, for once in his life, doesn't say a word, doesn't try to defend himself, doesn't try to spin a lie that will save him, because he knows as well as I do that there is nothing he can say that will undo what has already been revealed. His usual arrogance has been stripped away, leaving nothing but a hollow shell of the man who has spent his entire life getting away with everything, a man who has finally been backed into a corner with no way out, no excuses left, no one left to cover for him. And yet, despite everything, despite the proof sitting right there in front of her, despite the fact that her son has just been exposed in the most humiliating way possible, despite the fact that the entire family has now seen him for what he really is, my mother finally exhales, places her wine glass carefully on the table, and utters the words that confirm what I have always known deep in my heart, the words that remind me that no matter how much truth I bring to the surface, no matter how much damage Ethan has done, no matter how many times he betrays the people around him, she will always find a way to excuse him. "He just made a mistake," she whispers, her voice quiet but firm, her expression pained but unwavering, her hands trembling but her loyalty to him as strong as ever. And that is when I laugh, not because anything about this is funny, not because I find the situation amusing, not because I have any joy left to give to this family, but because of the sheer absurdity of it all. The sheer insanity of watching a mother who has just been presented with undeniable proof of her son's betrayal still choosing to defend him, still choosing to believe that somehow, some way, Ethan deserves to be forgiven, deserves to be saved, deserves to walk away from this without facing a single consequence. A mistake, I repeat, my voice dripping with bitterness, my head shaking as I look at her, really look at her, for the first time in my life seeing her exactly as she is, not as the woman I once hoped she could be. Not as the mother I spent years trying to please, but as someone who is incapable of ever holding her son accountable, as someone who would rather destroy everything in her life than admit that Ethan is anything less than perfect. Of course, I continue, my tone laced with mockery, with exhaustion, with the final strands of patience slipping through my fingers. A mistake. Just like when he wrecked my car. Just like when he stole my college fund. Just like when he blamed me for things I never did. Just like when he took and never faced the consequences for it. She flinches, but she doesn't argue, because she knows I'm right, because deep down, in whatever part of her that still clings to logic, she knows that Ethan has always been the one to take advantage, to manipulate, to destroy, and yet, she still can't bring herself to turn against him. My father remains silent, his face unreadable, his hands folded in front of him like he's processing everything, like he is torn between the truth and the years of programming that have made him believe Ethan is untouchable. But I'm done waiting for them to catch up, done waiting for them to see what has been right in front of them all along, done waiting for them to finally turn on him when I know they never will. They will always choose Ethan. They will always protect him. They will always find a way to convince themselves that he is just misunderstood, just unlucky, just a poor little boy who needs another chance. And that is when I realize, with absolute clarity, that I don't need their validation anymore. I don't need my mother to see me, don't need my father to finally take my side, don't need this family to acknowledge that I've been wronged. Because the truth is, they never will, and I refuse to waste another second of my life waiting for something that will never come. So I turn to Ethan, lean in just close enough that only he can hear me, just close enough that I can see the beads of sweat forming at his hairline, just close enough that he knows, without a doubt, that whatever he thinks this is, whatever he thinks the worst of it might be, he is wrong. This was just the beginning, I whisper, my voice so steady, so calm, so cold that I see the flicker of fear flash across his face before he can stop it. Because my revenge? Oh, it isn't over. I spent years swallowing my anger, years pretending I didn't care, years believing that one day, my family would finally see me, finally choose me, finally give me the place at the table that I deserved. But I don't need their love, don't need their acceptance, don't need anything from them except the satisfaction of knowing that I have finally, taken away the thing that Ethan has relied on his entire life, his ability to manipulate, to charm, to destroy without consequence. By the time Thanksgiving weekend is over, Ethan has lost his job because I sent those screenshots to his boss, and as it turns out, companies don't like hiring men who get caught cheating with their married coworkers. His girlfriend? Gone, because I sent the evidence to her too, and there's nothing quite like ruining someone's life by simply presenting them with the truth they should have known all along. His reputation? Destroyed, because I made sure that every single person who ever looked at Ethan like he was a saint finally saw the real him. And as I walk out of my parents' house for the last time, stepping onto the cold pavement with the weight of their disappointment pressing against my back, I do not look back, do not hesitate, do not feel a single ounce of regret. Because for the first time ever, I win.